Hello, Sanses and Papyruses. My name is TV Sky, and welcome back to what I think will be the last episode in this little Diablo retrospective video series thing. We're gonna go kill the Skeleton King, and trying to talk a little bit more quietly, and I've turned my microphone up a little bit, which might lead to some distortion, but it is like 4 a.m. right now. My roommate is trying to get some sleep, the poor person. We'll go kill the Skeleton King, yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about the themes that are at play in Diablo, and a little bit more about, I guess, a little bit more about how I came to like Diablo so much that I just did several episodes of a Let's Play video where I ramble on relatively coherently about the themes and thematics at play in this particular game. So I made a comparison in a previous video between Diablo and Dark Souls, which is really quaint and... oh god, I forgot Devilkin are also resistant to fire. Which is the kind of thing that's incredibly boring from, you know, people who talk about video games. They'll just compare everything to bloody Dark Souls over and over and over again like it means anything. But I think there is a meaningful comparison to make a little bit between Diablo and Dark Souls. In that they, at least in my reading, they're both games about trauma. They're both games about, you know, depression. They're both games about faded ancient kingdoms. You know, faded glories, like you arrive. Tristram used to be a beautiful, gorgeous, you know, big, important trading town. It used to be full of people and life and stuff that happened and it's going on, and now it's just these little collection of houses where there's barely enough people to fill them, and everybody is, you know, broken and sad and miserable and dealing with trauma. And it's very much, while I will not say that this game is designed quite as well as Dark Souls, because it's not, it's from 1996, it touches on, at least for me, a lot of the same feelings when I play it. Like, I get a lot of the same feelings playing this as I do when I very occasionally record footage for my Dark Souls series. It's the same kind of ethos. It's like, it's all this dark, European-inspired gothic horror stuff being put to use to say something. Like, the aesthetic of Diablo says something. It means something. It's talking about, you know, the coldness of power and, like, the gothic architecture and just the gothic architecture style that's influencing a lot of what Diablo is, and also a lot of the, you know, classical architecture. All of that monumentalism is...
Prepare yourself to serve my master for eternity.
yeah, voice acting in 1996 was not really at an advanced level in games. So many archers in this level, damn it. And I'm using a sword, which is not the greatest weapon to use against the skeletons, because they can resist some of the damage, and they can be harder to hit. But I just, on a stat check level, I should have just enough stats to be able to weather it. There we go.
I can't get there from here. I can't get there from here.
Leoric in the game here is he's the first major boss that you fight. I mean, the first boss you fight who really kicks your ass is... uh-oh. I think I activated him. Damn it. I didn't want to pull aggro on him yet.
I can't get there from here.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to make you move, asshole. Okay, he was not aggroed, or he would be here opening the door. Okay, good. Leoric in this game is an iconic character. Iconic enough that Blizzard decided to revive him for Diablo 3 and make him a boss in that game as well. In fact, the act-ending boss for Act 1 of that particular game. The Skeleton King revived once more. And that game tried to do a lot to expand upon what happened in the aftermath of Leoric's madness. It tried to expand a lot on, you know, all the stuff that went on, and like Leoric's madness and the terrible things he did to people. And all I could think while I was watching that happen is, this means nothing. All of this expansion on his character, all of this expansion on who he is and what's going on and stuff. Oh, I forgot he has mana burn. That's great. Let's just get away from archers for a sec. I can't remember if he still raises undead. Yes, he does. He most definitely does. Okay, let's find a doorway. There. It's gonna limit... Yeah, I can't beat him. I can't beat him on the stat check, because he's gonna hit me and he's gonna heal. Or maybe I can. Maybe I can. Come on, come on. There we go. See, there it is. Rest well, Leoric. I'll find your son. The reason Leoric is corrupted, the reason he is the Skeleton King, the reason these things happened was because of the death of Albrecht. And so, in the first game, it's about this conflict, it's about this trauma, it's about this misery. When you kill Diablo, you lay Albrecht to rest. Like, you absolve the poor son of the sins of the father, and indeed of bloody Leoric, that asshole. And then they bring him back in Diablo 3 as this bad guy who is evil and who just kills people, and who does, like, they showcase like ghost scenes of him doing terrible torture things to people, and he has all these new minions that lurk in this new area that he was never connected with before. Hey, dude. And none of it means anything at all. None of it means anything, because you resolved that here. Like, that was the whole point of your quest as the adventurer in this damn game, was to lay to rest those sins, lay to rest those miseries, and free the town of Tristram, but also just the world of Diablo from the consequences of all of this. And when you kill the Skeleton King here, you lay him to rest. Rest well, Leoric, I will find your son. And eventually, yeah, you do find his son. And it's kind of terrible, and it's, you know... And then they bring him back for Diablo 3. Not to say anything about Diablo 1 and the storyline, not to say anything about Lazarus. I did it again, I don't know why I keep doing that. Not to say anything about Lazarus. What the hell, am I developing a speech impediment? Not to say anything about Lazarus, not to say anything about Albrecht, his relationship with his son, his relationship with the townspeople of Tristram, just because he was a cool enemy from the first game. And so they gave him a even bigger weapon and a bunch of extra stuff on top of him to make him cooler and more menacing and more badass. And they did this whole subplot about...
Hello, my friend. Stay a while and listen.
Just identify some items. There we go. This whole subplot about some, like, this counselor who was desperately trying to get you, no, you must not ever allow Leoric to come back to life and stuff like that, with his crown, which was apparently supposed to be so special that it could bring him back to life somehow, and all of this sound and fury got added on top of it. All this nonsense, all of this stuff.
Oh, what can I do for you?
Got just kind of plastered on top of what Leoric was in Game 1, and it changed nothing about him. It expanded nothing. It added nothing to who he is as a character. It added nothing to the themes that were at play with him about, you know, what the death of his son did to him, and what happened to his kingdom and his fraught relationship with his knights, who were eventually forced to kill him just to try and keep him from tearing the entire kingdom apart. None of that changed or was influenced or altered in any way when he was brought back for Game 3. It was just, hey, Leoric is here. He was cool in Diablo 1, right? It's a reference. And it's the same thing with Adria, who we're going to see right now. Adria is not a major character in Diablo 1. She lives in the outskirts of town, all the hell the way out here. And if you talk to her about various things that happen in the game, she will have a lot of insight into the nature of demons and the nature of hell and the nature of Diablo and stuff like that. And she'll know a lot more than you might think that she should know. And she's this kind of enigmatic, weird character.
I sense a soul in search of answers.
I sense a soul in search of answers, who gives you this really weird quest midway through the game to find a mushroom for her that turns out not to matter. She's not a major character, and she's not important in this game. She doesn't have a thematic role. She doesn't really have a relationship with any of the other townspeople, insofar if you can get them to tell you anything about her. Mostly they will tell you that they don't know anything about her, and they're not really sure what they think of her, except that, you know, she does good potions, which is nice. And then they bring her back for Diablo 3, and now she's not just the old mysterious witch who lives on the outskirts of town. No, she was the lover of the main character of Diablo, or of the protagonist of Diablo 1. No, they were lovers, and they had, you know, these nights of passion between each other, and she became a dedicated follower of Diablo and became corrupted to Diablo's side, and she started laying all these dark, specific plans for having her daughter and then using her daughter to bring Diablo back to life, and all of this nonsense got added on top of Adria as a character and who she was and what she wanted and what her motivations were and stuff like that. But none of it changed. Like, I play Game 1 now knowing all of this stuff that's going to get added on top of her character. But I go to her and it doesn't change, it doesn't recontextualize any of her behavior, that all of a sudden, now it makes sense that she had that voice line where she did the thing, and now I get why she has this relationship with that other character. It doesn't recontextualize anything, it doesn't change anything, it doesn't expand on any of the threads or plots or storylines from the original game. It doesn't change anything about Leoric and Albrecht in this game. That story about them and Lazarus, that Adria was secretly on Diablo's side the whole time, it doesn't it doesn't do anything. In fact, all it does is raise a bunch of questions about why the hell wasn't she more active in this game then, if you were going to bring her back and have this whole subplot about all of that. If you were going to expand on all of that, you should do that because it does something, it says something about the conditions of the original game, the conditions of the original characters. If you're bringing back references to the first game, it has to be because you want to say something about the first game. It has to be because you want to expand something, or you want to recontextualize something, or retcon something, or because the first game has some kind of relevance or resonance to what's happening in the third game. But it doesn't. It's just a reference. It's just a callback. It's just a, hey, remember this other thing we did once upon a time? Diablo 1 was pretty cool, right? Nostalgia. Hey! And I recognize the irony that I'm essentially doing this video primarily because I'm nostalgic to a certain extent for the first Diablo. And here I am complaining about Blizzard playing on nostalgia. When they brought back elements of Diablo 1 and Diablo 3. But it's so shallow. And it's so just kind of there to string together a plot that justifies going to the new place and getting the higher numbers over and over again.
Please, no hurt, no kill. Keep alive, and next time good bring to you.
Garbad the Weak. I think Garbad the Weak actually came back in Diablo 3 as well. I think Garbad I think no, yeah, I think that's in the when you can do the town portal thing to go into the Diablo 3 air quotes remake, which is just like the downscale Diablo 3 graphics, and then some of the music from Diablo 1, like that shitty thing.
Nothing yet. Almost done. Very powerful. Very strong. Live, live. No pain. And promise I keep.
I love Garbad's voice acting. Essentially, every time you leave and come back, he will progress down his dialogue tree. Now he's going to attack me, I think.
Nothing yet.
No. Oh,
I can't carry anymore.
Something for you. I am making.
there we go.
Again, not kill Garbad. Live and give good.
There we go. That was the dialogue he was actually supposed to deliver there. Oh yeah, crafting is also added in this mod, never part of the original game, and it's a terrible addition, in my opinion, because crafting, again, is just about making the numbers go up. Anyway.
Something for you. Something.
Okay, not yet. I think I'll just go up to the upper level and come back down. That should trigger him to do his final dialogue and attack so I can kill him. I like Garbad's voice acting. That's one of the few pieces of voice acting in the original Diablo I like. There's another character called Shar the Mad who you'll run into in the labyrinth.
Something for.
I have no room.
Okay, whatever. Who you will run into eventually in the game, who has some lovely bits of voice acting as well. But yeah, Diablo 3 is shallow. It's a clicker game. Like, that's returning to the whole gothic cookie clicker thing. Diablo 3 is not about its story. Diablo 3 is... that's what annoyed me so much about all the callbacks and all the references it was making to Diablo history and stuff like that. It was so flat and empty. That's a quest item, by the way. And it didn't do anything. Like, it didn't change anything. It didn't mean anything to this story, to this world, to these characters, to these people.
Greetings, good master. Welcome to the Tavern of the Rising Sun.
Hello, my friend.
And that's the change in mentality. I think Diablo 1, like I said, I think there is... You can argue about how good the story is, and that's certainly worthwhile to do, because it's not always a great story. It's not always a great game. It's repetitive. It relies a lot on just click over and over and over again. And stuff like that, but it was about something. Even if it didn't manage to be about that thing in the most creative, interesting way every single time, it was about something. But Blizzard doesn't remember what that something was anymore, I don't think. Which is why it makes perfect sense to put Diablo 3 on mobile. Like, because it's a cookie clicker game. It's a clicker game. It's about making the numbers go up. It's about the Skinner box of picking up the better loot, getting the better numbers, and seeing the bigger numbers on your screen. And I guess that's fine. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like I said, I think Diablo 3 is a really good game. Like, I think it's a really well-made, really well-polished game. But I don't think it's Diablo. Except in... That's what they called it. Because it doesn't have anything to do with this game. I do love the sound of just hitting them. I don't think it's Diablo. I think to me this is Diablo. A game, this claustrophobic, labyrinthine, clunky, frustrating, hard to play, badly voice acted, extremely limited game, defined by its limitations much more than its possibilities. Telling this small, petty story almost about, you know, boy who got killed and a man who got really sad about his child dying, and not much else really. But it was about that. Like, it was about that thing, that small, petty, personal thing, in a way that Diablo 3, for all of the hours that I've put into it, for all of the time I've been hooked on its Skinner box... Okay, no, we're not doing that. never managed to really feel like it was about anything. And that's just, yeah. Diablo 3 isn't Diablo. It's a pick up the loot and beat the monsters over the head with the loot until better loot falls out, and then pick up that loot and beat some more monsters over the head with that loot game. It's such a weird thing to say, because Diablo 3 puts so much more time and resources into lore, into not story. Doesn't put that much effort into its story, I don't think, but lore. Just lore, ever-present lore. Like, every monster you kill unlocks a lore entry with an audio log that plays that tells you all about, like, some little vignette or story about how this monster came to be and how it ties into the greater cosmology of the world, and what kind of role does it have in the ecosystem if it's not a hell monster but an animal monster kind of thing. And all of that. But it's got so much less to say. With all of that lore, with all of that stuff, it has so much less to say, because, like, knowing exactly what a fallen one is, what kind of demon it is, and, like, where it fits in the demon hierarchy, or how, you know, the people of the world react to having fallen around, or some scholar's opinion on what the fallen are and stuff like that. That means less to me than in this game, where they mean nothing. Like, where the monsters are just there as a literalization, as a literal representation of the evil that lurks in the labyrinth beneath the cathedral. That's all they are. And you could make up a demon hierarchy, and certainly the game does. Like, in the manual, again, to the original Diablo, returning to that for a second, there are page after page after page of a lot of monster descriptions, like, dealing with, like, where it's written as though these are demon scholars who have poured a lot of time and effort and research into understanding who the demons are and how they fit together. All of that is available information. It exists on some level. Not for every kind of monster, but for a lot of them.
That stench. Is it me? Or are there zombies down here?
But it's not, it doesn't need to be there in the game. Like, the game doesn't need to pad out itself with that lore content in order to feign some kind of depth, which is what it feels like in Diablo when you have all that lore, all those monster descriptions and stuff. It feels like it's feigning depth. That's early for the Overlords to show up. It feels like it's just trying to put stuff in there to say, hey, look how much stuff is in here. Rather than, what does any of this stuff mean? What does any of this stuff do for the story of the game we're trying to tell, for the world that we're trying to build? Like, Diablo 1, for me, has infinitely better world building than Diablo 3. Even though Diablo 3 spent so much more time and effort building its world, it's done so much less efficiently that it just doesn't really matter to me in the end. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't do anything for me. Which is a real pity, but, you know, sometimes that's the way it goes. Anyway, I think we'll cut this series and this little retrospective here. We made it to level 12 and down to level 5 of the labyrinth, and like a couple of hours of gameplay. That's not too terrible. And thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you for clicking on to this video, despite the fact that I've been kind of putting myself down by calling this filler content rather than real content, which I have to be honest, it is. Thank you for sticking along with me. Like, I'm not going to have any idea how people are going to be responding to this until I obsessively check my phone while I'm at the convention to find out what people are saying in the comments and, like, find out whether they hate it or whether they like it or whether they think this is, you know, hot garbage or whatever.
Whoa, what can I do for you?
So thanks for sticking with me
Hello, my friend.
for this little
Stay a while and listen.
weird exercise. Like I've said a couple of times probably at this point, I'm gonna collect some of all the footage that I got here, and some of all of my thoughts and some of all of my feelings about Diablo, and someday, I can't really promise that it'll be soon because there's so many damn projects I'm working on. Someday, I'll turn it into some description of a video essay where I collect my thoughts on the series in a somewhat more coherent way. And, yeah. Thank you very much for watching.